Mr. Lopez, you may proceed.
Thank you, Chair Napolitano, for the invitation to share with you all today. I'm participating in this subcommittee hearing virtually from the ancestral homelands of the Tongva, Quiche, Gabrieleño, specifically the community of East Los Angeles. I also want to acknowledge my grandfather, Ricardo Jesus Gutierrez, who helped lay the groundwork with the Mothers of East LA, Santa Isabel. That makes me qualified to speak before you today. He passed just a week ago. I appreciate the opportunity to speak from the perspective of the experiences of our communities when it comes to the revitalization and reuse of contaminated lands, with the focus on threats, opportunities, and the importance of engaging communities. My name is Mark Lopez, and I am a member of East Yard Communities for Environmental Justice. I also currently serve as the East Side Community Organizer and Special Projects Coordinator. East Yard is a movement based in the communities of the East Side, Southeast Los Angeles, Long Beach, and surrounding communities. We focus on building well-informed and well-equipped self-advocates for the self-determination of our communities. We recognize that many of the harms our communities have historically faced and continue to deal with are because of the planning of public agencies and private entities without our consent or involvement, intentionally and unintentionally. It's important to understand that toxic cleanup can actually reproduce harm. Federal investment in the cleanup of contaminated sites isn't the end of the story for our communities. While this type of investment has the potential to boost economic opportunity and community cohesion, it can also just reopen real estate for the development of new toxic facilities. Seaport and inland port communities across the country are especially vulnerable given the takeover of our communities by large-scale warehousing. Job-dense career hubs have been transformed into indoor parking lots with low-wage temporary work, driving up real estate costs while robbing our communities of economic opportunity and contaminating us with thousands of toxic truck trips a day. In some cases, we've even had to fight off lowest hanging fruit projects that threaten to recontaminate cleaned up sites in order to ensure the development of community assets are prioritized. In some cases, cleaning up contaminated sites can lead to whole new problems. High amounts of public investment without community protections can result in the displacement of existing communities, both residents and the local businesses they sustain. Private investment typically follows public investment to exploit the revitalization intended for existing communities, but instead only prioritize profit at the cost of community cohesion. This is why many have called for better neighborhoods, same neighbors. Through the Lower Alley River Revitalization Plan, a 21-mile stretch of communities riddled with contaminated sites identified by US EPA Region 9, we've been able to develop the Community Stabilization Toolkit, which includes community benefits agreements, inclusionary housing policies, locally owned business support, no net loss housing policies, rent control ordinances, community land trusts, and workforce development. Federal funding requirements can make these community stability programs and policies a requirement for funding, or at the very least include them in scoring criteria for funding applications in order to contribute to community stability instead of threatening it. And to drill down on local targeted hire and workforce development, we cannot underestimate the value of people cleaning up contaminated sites in their own neighborhoods. For one, this is a direct monetary investment in the community through targeted hire of local residents who are impacted by toxic contamination, as well as an investment in the economic future of communities through workforce development. There's an opportunity here to utilize the historical harms in communities to generate careers for those most impacted and infuse dollars directly into communities immediately. This is what we've seen with the Exide cleanup in my community. Not only has the state's Workforce for Environmental Restoration in Communities program trained and certified community members to literally remove poison from our communities shovel by shovel, but these workers have taken extra responsibility to call out the behavior of bad actors amongst contractors who seek to cut corners to maximize profit or operate with a culture of racism, sexism, and sexual harassment. And all of this is possible through community partnership. Local jurisdictions have limited capacity and authority. The rail yards between Exide and our homes remain contaminated beyond the reach of the state agency because of federal jurisdiction, which means every time the wind blows, our community is threatened. We also face limited vision and follow through of local jurisdictions because of turnover of staff and elected officials. Meanwhile, the memory of our communities allows us to look into the past before freeways cut up and displaced our communities, railroads changed the character of our neighborhoods, and toxic facilities poison generations of our families. We have had to build up and defend our communities, fill gaps, and build bridges between agencies because we are committed to fighting for life. Thank you.
Mr. Lopez, you talk about the benefits of having the affected communities be actively involved in the cleanups and utilizing a local workforce to invest directly in the economic future of area communities. Can you elaborate how a local workforce was recruited in the situation that you've discussed?
Yes, thank you, Representative Carvajal. In our case, essentially, the state agency was able to partner with the local trade school. This is an area that our community members already look towards in order to receive the training and certification to be able to seek better employment opportunities. And so resources were dedicated to develop a pilot program at the trade school. LA Trade Tech is the name of the school, and train cohorts of community members essentially to be able to learn and understand the work, again, be trained, and most importantly, be certified to do the work, because we're talking about handling of hazardous substances, and sometimes paying for this type of certificate becomes a barrier to lower income communities being able to access these future employment opportunities. And so what this did is it created a base for community members to be able to enter this employment. And so the way most people found out about it was from those of us who had been fighting to shut down this bad actor for years and generations. And so it was community members who were already aware of this toxic polluter. In some cases, it was the very people whose homes needed to be cleaned up because lead had been contaminating their homes for decades. And so these are, again, our folks who are directly impacted by the contamination, who now have prevailing wages, sometimes double what they were previously making in other employment opportunities. And it really just changes the trajectory of families in our communities when we're able to access these types of employment opportunities.
Just the same, I'd like to ask Mr. Lopez an important point. When redevelopment does happen on contaminated sites, the community should have a say in the redevelopment, so that it is not another polluting facility and creating jobs that are still polluting. Can you explain further your concern? How local coordination and buy-in can result in cleanup efforts, especially in training. I like the idea of having training classes for the local community to participate. And Mr. Lopez, I like all your points on the stabilization toolkit. Mr. Lopez?
Thank you, Chairman Napolitano. Yes. Here in the Los Angeles area, and I think in most port communities across the country, again, inland ports and also seaports, what we're seeing is large areas of commercial and industrial land being purchased and utilized specifically for warehousing. And so what this does at the local level, it essentially displaces career opportunities for temp jobs that pay low wages. And because they carry such a large footprint, that's what prevents future development of other types of industries that can provide careers for our community members. Additionally, because we're looking at what are primarily diesel trucks that are servicing these facilities, the pollution that community members are exposed to comes with a greater health risk. And I think additionally, when we're looking at this process and kind of connecting to the green gentrification that was mentioned earlier, it is kind of a slap in the face for communities to have had to deal with these issues, often be the advocates to resolve these issues, and then not be able to get the benefits, right? And so that's what we're experiencing here in our communities. And I think that's where, when we measure success, I think there's lots of metrics, but at the end of the day, success is measured, is defined by communities because it's experienced by communities. And so we look at
I'm sorry, but sometimes the community cannot speak for itself because they're not able to because of language difficulties. So how do we overcome that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge issue, but that's where when we have a representative, when we have staff of agencies that is able to be come from experiences from these communities. And of course, language access is always a priority for us. And when we have existing community infrastructure to support each other in cases where agencies have gaps, is where we've seen the most success to be able to bring all constituents to the table to have an investment and a say in what moves forward.
Very good. Well, and also decisions when the companies decide to go bankrupt to avoid financial responsibility, what changes do we need to make sure they are held responsible?
Yeah, I mean, I think in this case, unfortunately, bankruptcy court really privileges corporate entities at a disadvantage to our communities and taxpayers who often have to come in and essentially pay the way. And so I think what is really needed is earlier action from federal, state, and local agencies who have the authorities around contaminating facilities, whether it's air, water, or land, toxics, to ensure compliance up front, right? To ensure that these don't become legacy issues in our communities, but then to create action while the companies are still fully operating to ensure that this isn't an issue that we're dealing with 30, 40, 50 years down the line, once a company has been able to restructure and sever its liabilities, which essentially is contamination in our communities.